What's up guys, and welcome back to the F-100 project. Today is the day we are finally tearing into the truck itself. So I have it pulled into the shop on the lift. I did off camera go ahead and kind of reverse some of the stuff we did in the earlier video, putting the small block Chevy in just so we can pass a VIN inspection. I got us to a point where I can actually start to dig into this thing today. The name of the game is going to be removing all of the front suspension, probably a lot of this stuff mounted to the firewall as well. We're not going to utilize any of that. If you're not familiar with this project, in the last video, I actually pulled in our donor Mustang and got the Gen 2 Coyote with the 6R80 transmission pulled out. Also have the complete IRS pulled out of it. Showed off the Crown Vic front suspension that we have for this thing as well. I actually don't think I've shown these off yet either. So this is what we're going to be utilizing for the seat. Obviously this is much further down the line. This is a King Ranch rear seat for an F-150, I believe. So I'll go more into detail on that when we get to that point of the build, but I figured I'd talk about it since you guys are gonna see it right here. So name of the game today is gonna be removing all of this front suspension, and it is rusty. So I'm just gonna start from the top down. We're gonna undo this clutch linkage, then we're gonna undo shifter linkage, get that out of the way. Move on to the steering box. Then it should just be the 4 leaf spring bolts, and the whole assembly should drop out, in theory, pretty simply. And I went ahead and unbolted the whole rear axle assembly and leaf springs as well. So I'm hoping we can just raise the truck off of them now, and then it'll be a little bit more evenly weighted. But again, I'm gonna go slow and make sure we don't tilt too far one direction or the other. Little testy test. Okay. Still a little back heavy, but nothing crazy. Good riddance, old leaf spring suspension. A lot of really good progress made yesterday. I did go ahead this morning and pull out the steering column and steering box assembly. They are all one unit on this truck. So unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to use any of that with our new setup. So I'll have to figure out a solution for that. But this cross member is the only thing left that I think will be removed at some point, but I don't think that we have to remove it yet. I'm pretty sure most of what we're going to be doing is going to be quite a bit further forward, but I believe that's going to be right exactly where our Coyote exhaust is going to run. So at some point I will need to cut out those rivets and get that thing out of the way. But for now, I'm going to keep the structural rigidity that that provides and just keep it in the truck. So for mounting the Crown Vic front cross member, there's a couple of different things we have to do. One is we have to find the center line of where we want the front axle to be. On this particular truck, it's very convenient that these bump stop holes, this big guy right here, matching one on this side, those are right at the center line of the front axle. So if you remember the factory setup with the leaf springs, there was a solid axle in the front. That comes up and hits the frame directly in the center line. So we're going to utilize that to get the center of where we want to mount it on the truck. Very conveniently, on a Crown Vic front subframe, there are 2 locating dowels that are right directly in the center line of this front axle. Only problem being, these are like a nylon or some kind of plastic, and they're hollow. So originally my plan was I was going to chuck this up in the lathe, just turn this side down to 1/4 inch or whatever size those holes are, and utilize that. That's not going to work because it's hollow, so if I turn this down, it's just going to be non-existent. Some people just open up the holes in the frame so that these fit in there. That's definitely an option. For me, I'm looking for an excuse to use my big lathe. So if you followed me for any amount of time, you know that I have this huge early 60s Clausen Colchester lathe I got from my buddies at Revival Cycles years ago. Believe it or not, 5 years ago, which blows my mind. So I had this thing kind of sitting in my shop for the longest time, mainly because I was missing a tailstock. This is, if you're not familiar with using a lathe, this is utilized probably half the time you use a lathe, you utilize a tailstock, and mine did not come with one. So I have been searching eBay monthly for 5 years. Finally, the exact one, size, everything off this exact model lathe came available, and I was like, I don't care how much it costs, I have to get it. So once I got that, I went ahead and invested in tooling, a chuck, all that kind of stuff. So this bad boy is finally up and running and usable. I have a big piece of brass in here. I'm going to attempt, I've never done this kind of stuff before, to machine my own little alignment dowels, I guess we're going to call them. So one side will be basically this exact diameter. We'll do that, and then of course this side, I'll measure the hole in the frame I just showed you. We're going to turn it down to be that size. And we're going to have basically 2 of these made out of brass that'll slide into the Crown Vic subframe and then up into the truck's frame. To start us off, I'm going to make myself a drawing to go off of, just to make sure I have all of the kind of critical measurements. A lot of this, I don't know, I'm going to shoot for some pretty tight tolerances, mainly because I haven't done a ton of machining, basically nothing on a lathe. So I just want to test my skills, and if I don't hold myself to a high standard, I'm never going to achieve a high standard, if that makes sense. So we are going to, let's just rough out something like that. It's going to come over, it's going to step up a little bit, then it's going to go down. I'm going to do the same here. Something like that. Don't judge my drawing skills. So this is here. So the hole in the frame is 420 thousandths. So I'm gonna shoot for probably 400 even for this little post. Then we'll match basically the rest of this. So this is 950. So from here to there, 0.950. That thing is 175 wide. 0.175. Any of you engineers that happen to be watching are probably cringing at my drawing here, but and then the OD of this is 760. .760. And then it does taper down a little bit. Let me look at the hole in the frame. Yeah, there's no requirement for it to taper down, so we probably won't bother with that. And then what else do we need to measure? Probably the overall length of this is 560. This is getting a little messy over here, 0.560. And then this side doesn't really need to be this long. We'll make it a nominal size of, we'll go 750. 0.750. Okay, that should be all of the measurements I need. Let's move over to the lathe. I believe we're ready to go over here. So I'm not going to end up showing you guys all this because I'm just going to take my time. Again, I've never done this before, and this is a very large machine to learn on, so I have to keep my wits about me. Let's go. So that's 220. here she is. So I still have a little nubbin to get rid of on that side, but I mean, I am very pleased. For my very first ever machined part, I did break the edges with a file so that they're not super sharp. Let's check our measurements real quick. So this long one should be 400 thousandths. On the money. This fatter section here should be, what, 950? Excuse me, nailed it. This one should be 760. 758.5. Okay, I don't think I'm getting fired, but a little bit off. We'll try the subframe first. So this should have a nice fit. Oh, there's some crusties in there. I don't know. I don't think it's going to go in. Let me see if I can clean out some of that junk. I might have made the tolerance just a little bit too tight because that piece I was measuring is made out of, I don't know, Delrin or some kind of plastic that, you know, is probably a little bit bigger than this hole. What I should have done is measured the hole. Yeah, that's not gonna fit. Okay, so I'll measure that hole and we'll see how much. It won't be a big deal at all. I'll chuck this back up and just skim a little bit off the edge. So that's on me, again, learning. Don't necessarily measure the part that comes out of the hole, measure the hole itself. Let's go try the truck side. I did measure the hole on this one. Oh yeah, fits right in. It has like wobble from, you know, just the length of it, but almost no wobble anywhere else, so that's really nice. Might end up fighting this a little bit for it being a little bit too tight, but that's awesome. Cool. All right, let me measure the hole in the subframe. We'll chuck this back up, trim it off, trim that little nugget off the end, and then we'll make a duplicate. Here they are, all done. I could not be happier with how they turned out. Turned down that larger diameter to 740 thousandths, and now perfect fit in there. Perfect fit over there. We're at the point now where I can kind of offer up the Crown Vic suspension. Try to tight squeeze. Okay. Gonna get us roughly in place here. Something like that. I'm learning very valuable lessons today. This lesson is don't believe everything you read on the internet. So on the Facebook page for F-100 Crown Vic swaps, this guy swore up and down that these alignment pins line up with these bump stop holes. I don't know if that's a year specific thing, and mine's a little bit different, but as you can see, our little adapter pin is right through the hole right there. Might be hard to tell, but on this side, it would punch through probably a 1/2 of an inch inside. So that is not gonna work for us. I'm going to pull the Crown Vic suspension back out. Go ahead and pull this rack and pinion out of the way. We're not gonna be utilizing that anyway. We're gonna use the electric power steering out of the Mustang. Get a good center to center measurement between the two pins. We'll transfer that measurement onto the frame, and I'll end up drilling new holes, you know, whatever distance, probably a 1/2 inch or so on each side, kind of inboard of where the existing holes are. And as long as those holes remain square, that's gonna be a perfect way to locate this thing. And I can utilize the pins I already made. I can be a lot more confident this thing's not gonna shift around. Then we can move on to drilling the big holes for the mounting brackets themselves. So let's pull all this back out and get a good measurement. We should be ready to go now. So you can see I have new holes just on the inside of the old ones. So the distance between pin to pin was 31.5 inches. The distance between the center of each hole on the factory frame was, I want to say 32.25. So a total of 3/4 of an inch that we need to come in. So basically do all the math, 3/8 of an inch on both sides. So I did all that, off camera, knocked it out, drilled the holes. We are ready to slide this thing back in, see if our pins actually go into the frame now. About there. Okay, that's one pin started. This thing doesn't sit flat. I have to jack this side up manually. Boom. Now you can see my little locating pins sticking right up through there. Now we know we are nice and square. I'll confirm all of that with some measurements off of the cab. I'll do some side-to-side measurements just to make sure nothing's too funky. From what I understand, Ford in the mid-60s was a very, we'll call it ish company. So none of these trucks are all of that perfectly square or anything. A lot of this was done kind of by hand or just very quick and dirty. So as long as we are close enough that this thing's not going to be crab walking down the road, we should be good to go. I'll just go ahead and show you some of my measurements in case anybody's watching that's doing the same thing. So I'm going to go off of this kind of flange, pinch weld, whatever you want to call it, right off the cab, right next to that mounting hole. And we're going to go right to the center of the shock bolt. You can see, we'll call it, it's right, the center of that's probably right between 15 and 7/8 and 16. Come over to the driver's side of the truck, go off that same flange right at that same bolt, and you can see we're right at between 15 7/8 and 16. So this thing is nice and square to the cab of the truck. The only unknown that I'm still just operating off of a perceived center line is how this wheel is going to fall into the fender. I don't know if that I want to drag in this whole front clip to verify that. So I might just go out to the front clip, measure kind of from maybe a mounting hole to the center of the wheel arch, maybe the door to the center of the wheel arch, something like that. Something to just confirm that I'm not crazy and we're not like inches off front to back. So what makes this install possible and light years easier is this kit from Range Industries. If you're not familiar with Range Industries, they are a US-based company that makes conversion kits for projects exactly like this. So this is their kit to bolt in the Crown Vic front suspension. We are also going to utilize their kit to bolt in the S550 rear suspension, as well as the conversion to the electric power steering on the Crown Vic subframe. So they make kits for all of that stuff. I reached out to them when I first kind of started this build, and they are awesome guys. And they said, hey, we want to jump on as a sponsor. They sent me all of this stuff. I'm extremely grateful. And the quality is insane. Like, I know it sounds like I'm going to be biased, but this stuff is legitimately incredible. So much better than anything you're going to find like overseas. It's all CNC billet. It comes with the bushings, all of the hardware, everything you need. Step-by-step instructions on their website that I'm utilizing. And the first step in those instructions, now that we have the subframe located, is to actually drill the 4 mounting holes through the stock subframe into our frame rails. Then that will kind of give us some reference holes to go off of for the rest of the brackets. Got the 11/16 holes drilled and was able to go ahead and bolt in this inner bracket. They are different, so there is a left and a right side. It's pretty obvious once you go to this step if you have them backwards. So now we're going to work on these outside brackets. So the idea here is there's 2 holes right there. Those correspond with 2 holes. It's going to be really dark, but basically there's 2 holes right there we're about to drill. And we'll sandwich the factory frame in between these 2 brackets. And then there's a hole that goes up to that factory mounting bracket, or hole right there on the subframe. So that's our next step, is to drill 8 half-inch holes using this bracket as a template. And then we'll bolt this part up and we'll be able to move to the lower control arm mount. Got all 8 holes mounted, and I went ahead and threw the hardware in as well, just so we can confirm everything lines up. Threw these bolts in. Everything fits absolutely dead nuts perfect. I could not be happier with the quality of this kit. And I'm not at all required to say good things. Anytime I do any kind of sponsorship, I tell them that I will not give a biased review. I'm going to tell it like it is, or don't send me your product. And I can honestly say that this is incredible. I mean, everything is just, it's exactly what you want. It fits perfectly. For a bolt-on kit, for suspension, for a 60-year-old truck, it's crazy that it's fitting this well. The last step is going to be these big brackets for the lower control arm. So that hole right there, bushing, is for that stud. In hindsight, I should have put these on before I bolted everything together, because now I don't have the room since I haven't removed my leaf spring mount yet. So I'll probably have to take a couple of minutes, unbolt everything, slide these in place, and then we use these as the template to drill the 2 mounting holes through the side there. And then this sucker is done. Got the lower control arm mounts all installed. Went super smooth. The only thing I did have to do was grind off the head of 2 rivets that are for that cross member that we will be removing. They were just in the way of those brackets, but drill a 1/2-inch hole for the bolts. It even comes with the little silver spacers so that our caster stays in the factory location. It's done. That's all good to go. So if I was running the Crown Victoria rack and pinion, the next step would be to install the sway bar mounts. It just utilizes the factory Crown Vic mount. You know, it literally goes around that little rubber bushing. You slide it up to the bottom of the frame, drill 2 holes on each side, nut and bolt, that's it. There's really nothing crazy. There's no special brackets or anything like that. But the instructions say if you are installing the Mustang electric rack, that you should go ahead and do that first, just to make sure that all the tie rods and all that stuff is all good to go before you mount the sway bar. So let me drag out the Mustang electric rack and we'll start with that conversion. Here's everything laid out for the power steering conversion. So the kit from Range Industries has our mounting bracket, also comes with inner tie rods. We're going to utilize the Crown Victoria stock outer tie rods. Mounting hardware, the little rack spacers, I opted for the electrical connector. We'll worry about that later on. And then it even comes with a little kind of zip tie, metal zip tie things for the boots. So what I need to do now is go ahead and remove the boots, the inner and outer tie rods off of the electric rack, and we'll start to install our new parts, get this thing ready to go. Got the inner and outer tie rods all swapped over and everything's good to go. So next step is going to be to remove these 2 mounting studs from the cross member, and then optionally you can actually cut these entire ears off. They say it's much easier to service it, get it in and out in the future with those out, and they're not going to serve any purpose for us at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and take a Sawzall, cut these ears clean, and then we'll use an angle grinder with a flap disc just to kind of smooth everything out. Then we're ready to start mounting stuff up. Ears trimmed off and mounting bracket put on. They do recommend using Loctite and then torquing these bolts to, I want to say it was 105 foot-pounds. Now that that is on, we are ready to install the rack. We're going to be using the 2 main mounting holes right there. Should match up with these guys. And then the kit comes with, I believe they're 14mm nuts and bolts for each side. And we're going to torque those to, I think it's like 148 or something like that foot-pounds. Obviously we don't want this stuff coming apart. Here's a look at everything bolted up. I cannot express how happy I am with how everything fits. The only thing I haven't officially mounted yet is the sway bar, but you can see how the factory Crown Vic mounts just literally line directly up with the bottom of the frame rail. So all I'm going to have to do is punch 4 holes through the bottom, nut and bolt. I just don't have the hardware to do it right now, but that's where the sway bar will live. We'll have nice clearance, about, say, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch or so in front of the steering rack. No issues there whatsoever. I am kind of at a dead end for the front suspension right now because I don't want to work on our steering linkage. 1, because I don't have the steering column. That's a problem. 2 is I really want to have the Coyote in place before I do that to make sure I don't just like make a steering joint that goes right into the exhaust. You know, I need to make sure we have the proper clearance. I can't do that until the engine's in place. I can't put the engine in place until my new motor mounts arrive. I ordered some specialty motor mounts that should raise the Coyote I think 1 inch, and then give us adjustability between 2 and 4 inches further back than they would sit on the stock mounts. Hopefully that gives us the clearance we need. Some people claim that you have to notch the kind of rear section of this cross member to clear the Coyote oil pan, but I'm hoping, and according to the website of this company, having it up and back a little bit gives us the clearance that we need. What I don't know is if that's going to run into firewall clearance and stuff. All of that will be in a future video once those parts arrive. For now, I'm gonna say this is a pretty good stopping point for this video. I'm sure it is a longer one, which a lot of you guys have requested. In the next video, I'm going to continue on the suspension journey, and we're going to do the rear IRS, so that this thing will be an official roller on its proper suspension. Then we can move on to pulling probably the cab off, doing some rust repair, gutting all of the things we're not going to use in there. There's no shortage of things to do, so stay tuned. I'll see you then.